Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today, I have some really important information, but it's going to have to be on redacted. It's going to be right at the end of the show. And the important information is an update from Dr. Bridle about what is going on and what they know and have documented in well-known journals, etc. But again, YouTube doesn't like this, so I'm going to keep it at the end of the show. So please go over to Rumble and Odysee and BitChute to check the rest of the show out. But let's get started. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. I put it out yesterday. I hope people find it useful. I kind of try and put it into a bit of a story, just all the links of what's happening, and you can click on the links and etc. You can join at CanadaReport.co. That's my scratch pad. That's where I put down all the ideas for what I'm working on. And at CanadaPoly.com. At CanadaPoly.com as well, there's a forum and you can join in the conversation. We'd love to have you. All right, let's get into it. Mass graves. Mass graves. Right. I didn't talk about this yesterday. And the reason that I didn't talk about this yesterday is because I thought they'll definitely come up with some information about this. They'll have, this is the reason why and blah, 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 blah. There'll be more information than just mass graves found at these sites or this one site. And I've heard people, and people who should know better, a lawyer actually on Twitter said, probably this is the case at all of the sites. And I was like, what? Why would you say that? Unless you know that, right? Like, that was weird. But the mass grave thing, I thought they would come out with a robust article about what we know, what we don't know, speculation, practice at the time, historical context to put things into perspective for the modern day readers. And that didn't happen. What happened instead was, hey, this drives a narrative perfectly. So they fit the narrative and drove it. Justin Trudeau tweets, to honor the 215 children whose lives were taken at the former Kamloops residential school and all Indigenous children who never made it home, the survivors and their families, I've asked the Peace Tower flag and flags on all federal buildings to be flown at half-mast. So we don't need to look into this. We don't need to put historical context to this. We don't need to figure out why these bodies were where they were, how they died, were their records kept, right? Like what is the deal, right? Instead, this is painted as a tragedy and flags are lowered to half mast. Here's CTV Toronto saying mayors across the GTA and Hamilton area have lowered their city's flags to honor the victims after the remains of 215 children were uncovered at the site of a former Kamloops residential school. Again, I think that it is getting right on board to drive a narrative home that has been building in Canada for years of the colonialists and invaders and all sorts of stuff. And I'm not saying that residential schools were good or anything to that effect. But maybe let's put it into historical context. And also, who was the prime minister who oversaw that? Wasn't that Pierre Elliott Trudeau? Wasn't that all Justin's dad's doing? Like, didn't he oversee that for years? He was the prime minister for 15 years or something like that. And 10 of those years, residential schools were active. Isn't that something to converse about? Isn't that something to put into the historical context of this announcement? Justin Trudeau goes right for the these are victims and doesn't mention dear old dad. I don't know. Seems to me to be narrative and not honest reporting about what happened and what happened in our country. And listen, I think warts and all, Canada is still a great country. Was a great country right up until 2015, and now we're teetering. But I think that these things that happen through history shouldn't be whitewashed, shouldn't be used to drive a narrative, should be put into historical context. Because these things happened within a context. They didn't happen within the 2020 context. They didn't happen because white people hate people or anything, right? They happened because of a context that was happening at that time. And we should be looking at it and trying to understand it, what happened at that time. And I think that it's folly to shoehorn in our own 2020 post-national anti-racist narrative onto this. That's what I think. I think that it's folly to do what we're doing. And hey, we're doing it anyway, right? Is this racist? CBC partners with the Black Academy to broadcast the first ever Canadian award show honoring Black talent. Listen, when you put all of Canada together, all of our musical talent, and Canada is very musically talented, and you put it on the Junos, do you know how many people, like there's 10 people who watch it, like across the country. Right? There's like 6 people on a board somewhere saying, can you wait for the judos? And then the other 4 come over because they feel kind of sorry and they like the popcorn. It's like nobody watches the judos. Being a really popular Canadian musician means you might get to be a really popular US musician, right? Like this is not the pinnacle of success in Canada. So like and I'm talking about all the musical talent, right? And just musical talent, but all the musical talent, right? Like let's not get into segregating by ethnicity or race or anything like that. But is this racist? Could you do this for Indigenous talent? Could you do this for Indian talent? Could you do this for and I mean like Sikh or people who are brown, Brampton, Mississauga area, right? Like Indian, not Indigenous Indian. Could you do that for white talent? How do you think that would go? Do you think, how long would that not make headline news, right? And I think that is interesting. This is being celebrated. Is it racist, right? By definition, yeah, I think so. But nobody seems to care about that now. It's all about, you can't be racist to white people, I think is what the idea is. You can't because they're the ones in power, right? So having a Black Academy Award show, no problem. Or a Black award show. An only Black award show. Is it okay to cut out Indigenous people? What about other people of color, right? And I think that this whole BIPOC thing is crazy, right? I think the idea of like casually referring to everyone else, everyone who's not white, and white itself is a whole grouping of people. Like it's not like one group of, it's not one country that is white, right? Like that is white. White consists of like Russia, Eastern Bloc, Eastern Europe, all sorts of different cultures, really different cultures, right? Like, so it's interesting that, like white people are one thing, but could you cut out Asian people? Could you have an Asian award show, right? Why are other people of color cut out? And why is it okay to use one descriptive term that is made up by, I don't even know who made this up. Who came up with this acronym? I think it's an insane idea that I would be offended if somebody was like, oh yeah, that BIPOC over there. Like, wait, hold on. Me? I'm, whatever. I'm Indigenous. I'm not a BIPOC. I'm Indigenous. You could be respectful. It's or I'm Black, or I'm whatever, right? Like you could be respectful. It just seems insane. And this, why can't we just celebrate Canadians, right? Like why can't we have a Canadian award show, right? It just seems like it seems folly. Like you can cut up any survey or survey's fine. To make it say women between 19 and 24 think this, right? But if you look at the whole survey, it's a very different outcome, right? It's very interesting when you start cutting up, like, if you look at just Black performers, then we'll have this award show. Like, what kind of award? Who's going to watch? And then if you point all this out, the NPCs get angry, right? Like the NPCs have the angry face on, right? Sure, you can be angry about it, but I'm just trying to understand what's racist in post-national anti-racist Canada, right? This is not racist, and me talking about the difference between different races, and if you could have an award schedule like this, probably racist. We'll find out, YouTube. Okay. The Toronto Star is reporting in total, the Canadian government spent $624.2 billion on the pandemic between March 2020 and April 2021. By December 2020, Ottawa had already spent more than the entire country spent on World War II, about $252 billion when adjusted for inflation. So we have spent almost three times what the Second World War cost. What did we get for that? Did we spend our money well? Could I have an itemized receipt, please? Where would I find that? I'd like all of the total spending and exactly what we got out of it. Somebody says, Mark says, this isn't me, by the way. The USA is doing it too, $6 trillion. They're going to crash the petrodollar. The Chinese yen is only 6 points away from overtaking the US dollar. Do you remember the other week when I mentioned that the Canadian dollar was really strong, like rallying crazy strong, and it wasn't tied to oil? It's because the US dollar is losing value. Why is it losing value? They're printing money. Quantitative easing, same as us, right? I don't know if they're using quantitative easing as the same mechanism. I've seen that term used in US publications, but again, I'm not a finance guy, so it's probably more complicated than that, okay? Make sure you understand that I am not a finance guy. I'm just a guy in my garage, okay? All right. Corey Morgan says, these are protesters. Remember when you could protest and light things on fire on railroad tracks so long as you were protesting against racism or something, I guess. Same thing's happening now with Palestinian protests. Corey says, kick the idiots off the tracks. If they really want to fight that battle, they can go to the Middle East. We haven't the time for that here. The Palestinian protesters have occupied the railway in Mississauga. They're demanding an arms embargo on Israel. Spread the word. Spread the word. We're all standing on the railway tracks. I'm pretty sure that's not allowed. If you're protesting the wrong thing, then it's not allowed. Toronto Sun is reporting Ford isn't ready to open the schools at this point. Remember last week when it was almost, and I mean, this was part of what the beginning of my newsletter was about. We started off last week and it was kind of accepted that schools were done. And then by the end of the week, it was almost accepted that schools were opening today, Monday. And now it's kind of up in the air and we're getting a new medical officer of health, which we'll get to in just a second. But it seems like schools aren't ready to be open, despite schools being open everywhere else. Most other places have schools open, kids in school. And Ontario has very strict restrictions on kids. Masking, no playing on the playgrounds. Some places have no mask, no voice rules. You can't talk to your friends during lunch until you're done eating your lunch, and then you have your mask back on, and then you can talk. You can't turn in your chair for fear of facing somebody, like to talk to them or something like that. Are you ready to send your kids back to prison? Do the parents have any kind of leverage to spring their kids from this kind of hell? I don't know. I mean, I do what I can. However, teachers are instructed there's all sorts of instructions from the ETFO. One of them is to call the Family and Children's Services if you think that the parents aren't doing everything to keep their child safe. And this was in response to a kid in my class isn't wearing their mask and their parent supports this. Like, what do you do? Call Family and Children's Services. Really? And there's a duty to report. If a child is being abused and you work in a setting that works with children, you have to report abuse, right? But is covering your face with a suffocating device abuse, or is not covering your face with a suffocating device abuse? Depends on which health order, who you believe, I suppose, from the public health, etc. So yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting, very crazy time. So Brian Lilly says Ford isn't ready to open schools at this point. Ford's gambit of asking for input in a very public fashion has turned the tables on those who urge him to follow the science. I don't know about that. I think that it was a signal that Ford didn't have confidence in his medical officer of health, and we see the proof in the pudding because he's fired him and he's replacing him today. The vote is coming in, so we'll talk about that in just a minute. We've got a couple of things to get to first. Pastor Hildebrandt was out in Waterloo Town Square, and there's quite a few people there showing up to lend their support, and this is an outdoor church. Did you ever think that this would be a freedom rally, a church unable to worship at their church, and so needing to take over the public square, and everybody kind of just being like, and I'm not saying that the church is wrong. I'm saying that the health orders are incorrect because clearly, these people have been meeting every week for a long time, right? We've been locked down since December, and we're being told one thing, and we are able to see with our eyes something different. So that's hard to reconcile. That's hard to say, everything's fine and everybody's being completely honest. Right? It's very difficult. Friendly reminder says, Ezra, the US is mostly open and Canada is mostly closed. Food shortages are concerning to me. Yesterday I said it doesn't look like we're moving in that direction. It looks like maybe product shortages, but I haven't seen any indication that food shortages would be on the horizon. And as if in answer, I saw this. And another one too this morning. It says, attention all fishermen, due to the possible exposure in the bay, I think, the wharf is closed to all public from now until the end of the fishing season. We know that this is not easy, but we all need to do our part. If you see someone that should not be on the wharf, do your part and ask them to leave. This is a very serious matter. The wharf is closed and nobody that has nothing to do on the wharf should not be on the wharf. Please spread the word. We all need to be vigilant and do our part. And this is just another union statement at the bottom. The bottom part is a fisherman, apparently. Just another union statement. Nothing different from politics or government, public health, safety. Fishermen will mingle with family and friends as they should. Nothing of danger, but a local retiree or tourist driving or walking on the wharf to enjoy the scenery. So they're not making it more difficult to shut down or to fish, but I feel like this is steps in that direction. Here's another one that's more plain, I suppose. Cyber attack shuts down global meat processing operation of JBS. Phone and computer systems compromised and operations paralyzed at JBS, one of the largest meat processing companies in the world. Across Australia, Canada, and the US have been shut by cyber attack. The impact is already being seen in JBS's Australian operations, where the company has cancelled Monday's entire beef, lamb kills across the nation in Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, and Tasmania. Overseas, it is still Sunday as this item is published, but it is anticipated that similar actions will happen in processing operations in North America and potentially South America from tomorrow. Monday is a memorial holiday in the US, which may help the company's North American operations buy some time to find solutions. So who knows what's going to happen with that? But cyber attacks are a very convenient thing to shut down integral systems in a country. And I mean, this is worldwide, right? And it's not like meat is not integral. It's one of the main food sources of protein and is necessary to keep this population fed, right? Like we've got a very, very large population. And if we've got a chink in the supply chain armor, or if we get a very big disruption in the supply chain armor, that's not going to be good fast, right? You know, most people don't live prepared day to day. And most people think that like Burger King is a thing that is never going away, not realizing that it's something that didn't exist before, 1950? I think it was probably the 70s, 60s or 70s, Burger King, right? McDonald's in the 50s or 60s. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But fundamentally, these convenience places, these abundant food places are relatively new. Like it used to be you had to pack a picnic and sit on the side of the road to eat if you were going somewhere in a day trip. Like you didn't just get food out. Okay, let's talk medical officer of health in Ontario to stay focused. Food is a big deal. It's a big deal. And if it's precarious, that's not good for a population. I just finished watching Back in Time for Dinner, and the rationing that went on in England and the United Kingdom during the Second World War was punishing. What the people had to eat, the amount of meat they had to eat was a very small amount. And it was very tough, like it was depressing watching it. And they only had to live that way for 10 days. By the end of 10 days, they were like, we're done. People in Britain had to live on rations from 44 to 55 and punishing. It's very difficult. So I hope that doesn't make a return here or make an appearance here. Okay, let's talk medical officer of health. The Ford government to formally table a motion to replace Dr. David Williams as chief medical officer of health. They're going to do that today. I think that yesterday I pointed out that if Dr. Williams was leaving on an amicable note, you'd probably see a different rollout of all of this. It seems very fast. It seems very about-facey. About-facey? Is that a word? It doesn't matter. The actions tell a story. And the story isn't, this is all in the plan and we're definitely doing exactly what we thought we were going to do. Step by step, we'll get out of this. It looks like, holy cow, this isn't going the way we thought. We got to get rid of this guy. We got to do something else quick. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Oh my God. That's the story that I feel like we're watching right now. And they're replacing the medical officer of health, David Williams, who was full-throated in support of getting the schools back. He was saying that they should open. I think he was one of the ones who was saying that they should open this week. They're replacing it with the medical officer of health, who's in Randy Hillier's district. And Mr. Hillier was sent a note, a letter from the public health in this is Kingston Frontenac, I think, and reading through it, it's a letter in, like he's talking about asymptomatic spread and he's talking about wearing masks for everyone's safety and blah, 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 blah. The date is August 2020. There's been revelations since then, but he's very, very restrictive in his approach is what I'm trying to get to. And he's openly hostile, maybe is hostile the right word, to people who are in disagreement with that approach, such as Randy Hillier. So it's very interesting that we're moving in that direction. Dr. Kieran Moore will be Ontario's incoming Chief Medical Officer of Health, says Christine Massey, after running a non-profit on the side during his gig as the Public Health Officer, Medical Officer of Health, that tracks the pandemic. So on one side, now he's the provincial officer of health, and I wonder if he's still running his nonprofit on the side. And she continues, she never did get a response from all of these people, City of Kingston, as to whether or not Dr. Moore had been receiving a second salary from KFLA PH Informatics on top of his $325,000 salary as the medical officer of health. So yeah, it's a very interesting situation where a lot of the medical officers of health are making beaucoup de bucks, a lot of money on this continuing. So are they incentivized to make it end as fast as possible, go back to normal? Well, I don't know. Rowan says, since I'm calling out nonsense today, Ontario Science Table's David Fissman's conflict of interest declaration shows funds received from the We Foundation, teachers' unions, and others. Why from We Foundation? That's an interesting note. Why from We Foundation, right? And so it's an interesting way to make sure people get what they want, right? Maybe an easy way to have, what's the word? Hold on, let me conceptualize. The idea that I saw speculated on was that We was an unofficial arm of the Liberal government. So the Liberal government wants this person to do something, Fissman to do something. And instead of paying Fissman directly, they pay We to pay Fissman, right? You see how it could line up? Now, I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's what I read on Twitter, and it's probably a crazy conspiracy theory that has no basis in truth whatsoever. But hey, I'm just a guy in my garage, right? Okay, so moving on. Who knows? Who knows why why Dr. Fissman is being paid by We? But it's the second one from the bottom on the first page there, talking about being an advisor, and he will be given an honorarium. Huh. Crazy, right? How do you advise We? Listen, take that plaque down right there, yeah, and put up a different plaque. And that way you double the money that you made on this whole investment, right? Simple. Consulting fee, please. Isn't that fraud? I don't know. Consulting fee, please. Okay, Roman Babber, hold on, tweeted this out yesterday. On Monday, PC MPPs will be forced to pass a motion giving Doug Ford power to extend the emergency orders to December without a vote or parliamentary debate. This unnecessary abuse of power is hostile to our democracy. We must condemn and oppose it unanimously. So this is the government notices of motion. Deferred vote on the motion regarding the extension of the expiry date of the powers referred to in subsection 8.1 of the Reopening Ontario Act. Whereas the Premier has recommended that the powers to amend and extend the orders be extended to December 1st, 2021. Therefore, the powers to amend and extend the orders referred to in subsection 8.1 of the Act are extended until the end of the day on December 1st, 2021. So, yeah, I hope that doesn't happen, but it seems like it's inevitable. And it seems like we will be spending most of the summer under some form of lockdown restrictions. And if you think that's going to end in September, I think that you're wrong. I hope that I'm the wrong one. I hope that I can go sit on a patio somewhere, or maybe play a gig in a summertime patio and be wrong about it, and everybody have drinks. And patio because it's nice weather, not because we have to be outside, right? If people want to be inside, I want them to be able to be inside. But goodness me, I feel like that's not in the cards. I hope I'm wrong. Moving forward, this is just another tweet talking about the MPPs who are going to be forced into voting for the extension of the emergency order. Could Canada face a fourth wave, says the Globe and Mail. New models suggest 4 scenarios hinging on vaccine rates. Fariel says, we've been in lockdown for over a year following these models. I think that it might be time to stop. Right? I think that it might be time to do something different. This is not a successful strategy, and if we continue this strategy, it is a very detrimental strategy. It's a strategy that will actually just kill the economy of our province. Why would we do this to ourselves? Why? For safety? Whose safety? Specifically. And really, you should watch the redacted part. We're going to get there soon. Just talking about the vaccine and the potential outcomes. Very interesting. Jason Kenny says, another milestone reached. Alberta's COVID-19 hospitalizations dropped below 500. This decline in the number of people in hospitals due to COVID-19 shows that Albertans' efforts to stick to guidelines and get vaccinated are paying off. As long as hospitalizations stay below 500, we will move to stage 2 on June 10th and be one step closer to having an amazing and fully open Alberta summer. Again, tied to vaccinations and now an arbitrary number of 500, then they'll get to move to stage 2, right? So is that how we want to live forever, right? Tied to these conditions and if this and if that. Isn't the government's job to build with our tax dollars a robust healthcare system that is able to support our society and not lock us down and remove our freedoms while they figure something out, and then after a year when they haven't figured anything out at all, tell us the only way to do this is lock people down? That's not acceptable. That's not solving problems. That's complete and utter failure. Total failure. Total failure. This was an interesting watch. This mall cop in Jackson Square, Hamilton, is, and if you listen, I'm not going to play the clip because it's rebels stuff here. So I don't want to scoop them or anything. But this guy here, and let's see if we can get a close-up picture of him. This guy here. You can tell he's a security guard, as far as I can tell, and that is a dangerous. And like you can get some security guards who understand where they fall in the hierarchy of things, but this guy's a big fish in a tiny little pond. He's so big that he's like almost out of the pond, right? Like you're like, oh man, whew, cool it there, boyo. And so he's overstepping his bounds, I think, as a security guard. And he's very aggressive about it. And people are not very happy about this because apparently he was threatening to arrest a guy who was just trying to get meds from the pharmacy. And it's an interesting interaction. But this is an illustration of what's happening to our society, right? Like there are people like this all the time. Doesn't matter if there's a pandemic or not. There's always people who are too big for their britches and people who think that their position gives them more power than it does. And that has to be dealt with one way or another, right? But it's interesting that this is the kind of thing that is almost encouraged now, right? Like this is the outcome of videos like the Punch a Nazi video, where the guy's walking down the street saying, you know what you've got to do about these people who disagree with us and the way we see things. We got to punch Nazis, and it's like that's not really actually a productive way to get your problem solved. It's actually more divisive and it doesn't work. It doesn't work to solve your problem. All it does is drive more division. So anyway, this guy's kind of a jerk. And I hope that, well, he said that he doesn't have to tell anybody his name or his badge number or anything like that, or his security guard ID number or anything like that. And Ezra kind of calls him out. He says, there's no such thing as the Properties Act. There's no law that would require you to turn off your camera. There is, however, a law that requires him to show his private security license to use Section 35 here, which he says that doesn't exist. I think that it's funny. I think that it's funny that people are so inflated by the propaganda meant to inflate them that they'll behave in a way like in a way like this guy does. But they won't question things that fearlessly, right? They won't question things in that way. They won't demand answers like this from the people who are supposed to be freely giving the answers, right? Like it's a very interesting thing. They'll police other people who they deem less powerful, right? But they won't ask the people in power in the same forceful way. What the heck, right? I find that just so strange. Right? Are they that willing to be subservient to anybody? Anybody who gives them a little bit of power? Weird. The government of Canada, moving on. The government of Canada has responded to Manitoba's request for support, and Canadian Armed Forces personnel are on the ground. We will get through this together. Right? Another one for the leaked email. Again, I haven't seen tanks or anything like that. Like we haven't seen citizen checkpoints with militarized checkpoints on the ground. I've seen barricaded bridges. I've seen police checkpoints. I've seen OPP checkpoints. I don't think any of these things are good, but it's not quite fit the email yet. We'll see. I've seen reports of military in Ontario, but again, I haven't seen any kind of checkpoints. I haven't seen military taking over civilian spaces and control of civilian spaces. So we'll see. Pending, right? Pending. But still very concerning. If we avoid the shortages, if the supply chain remains intact and there's no shortages, then I'll be very confused. I'll be very, very confused. Anyway, that's an interesting thing to know. Okay, in India, here's a UK newspaper, NTD. Again, it's hard to discern foreign newspapers, their credibility, but just go with me on this. It's just one newspaper. There are many, including very many mainstream, that were reporting the India strain, but this is an example. NDT News reports an increase in the virus variant originating in India casts doubt over the lockdown in England ending on June 21st. Boris Johnson says the country may have to wait. And that's similar messaging to Jason Kenney, similar messaging to Doug Ford. Like, oh, well, we didn't quite get there, wherever there is. And when we get there, you'll know, and we'll tell you about getting there, but we're not there yet. And so there has been moved, and moving forward, we won't open like we said we were. We'll move there to July 21st before we move it to August 21st. And then, sorry, too many cases, right? Just, it'll be October, right? And anyway, but the important part here is the Indian variant, okay? They're talking about the Indian variant. And apparently the government in India said, hey, hold on a second. The Indian government have asked the World Health Organization to send them proof of the Indian variant being isolated. They can't because it doesn't exist, according to this person. So the UK have now quietly tiptoed away from the narrative and swapped it for the Thai variant. People are eating tablespoons full of BS via the media and actually believing it. Yeah. Here is, I just typed in UK Thai variant. 3 days ago, 2 days ago, the Thai variant, what it is and why is, or what it is and is it more infectious? New COVID Thai variant detected in the UK. So 3 days, 2 days, everything we know about the Thai variant. Very interesting. Very interesting. It's like a sales pitch. It's like a sales pitch, really. 46 case outbreak of the so-called Indian variant in Newfoundland and Labrador. Doesn't sound like a big deal until you consider Newfoundland and Labrador are quite remote and had almost zero COVID most of the pandemic. Yet now, ... right? Indian variant, right? Isn't that wild? Newfoundland and Labrador is reporting 4 cases of COVID-19 on Wednesday, 2 of which are connected to the cluster in central Newfoundland, raising the cluster's total to 46. Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Fitzgerald, said are also 2 presumptive cases and 1 probable case connected to the cluster. There are now 6 people in hospital due to COVID-19. 4 of them are in central Newfoundland. Fitzgerald said the investigation into the source of the outbreak is ongoing, but the coronavirus variant B1617, first identified in India, has been confirmed as causing the wave of infection. Ah, yes, that very virulent virus, right? Here's another one. Indian Bar Association serves legal notice on WHO chief scientist Doctor. They claim she deliberately suppressed therapeutics. I'm not going to get into it because I'm still on YouTube. We're going to go over to the other one in just a minute, over to Redacted in just a minute. But it's all part of the same. India is fighting back and putting out different information. And that's interesting to note. I find that interesting to note. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, this is vaccine passports, says he wants to deal with G7 on vaccine passports. Prime Minister says he wants G7 to sign on a plan to vaccinate the entire world by the end of 2022. This was 22 hours ago, okay? And this is CBC. However, 14 hours ago, exclusive UK vaccine passport plans to be scrapped. The decision not to announce legal changes to mandate COVID passports would be treated as a triumph by backbench Tory MPs who vowed to join with Labour rebels to defeat the move. That would be interesting. That would be interesting because I think that the CBC is trying to use the UK's vaccine passports to legitimize the vaccine passports for Canada. And so not that I think that will, having the UK scrap it will help Canada see Texas, Florida, and all of the things that the U.S., like basically the U.S. is completely open and Canada is not. So I don't know that will actually do anything to change anyone's mind. But it's good. It's good, right? It's a step in the right direction, a small tentative step in the right direction. Is it enough? No. Now we need to demand more, right? Like, my goodness. Because freedom is non-negotiable, right? I think that it's incredible that we've been danced into a situation where we're negotiating our freedom with injecting a vaccine and having certain other restriction or other criteria met to restore our freedom, right? Like, we are truly prisoners in our own countries, waiting for the government to bestow our freedom back upon us, right? It's very, very concerning. Okay, we're going to head over to Redacted now. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And if you're coming over to Odysee, BitChute, or Rumble, really, you should. It's going to be very interesting, and we're going to be talking about Dr. Brindle and his current expert opinions on vaccination. So it's very important. Thanks for watching, everybody.